I'm gonna make a tutorial, try to keep it very quick for this blending technique. And so it seems a little bit difficult until you start playing around with it, and you'll see that it's really not difficult and it's pretty fun. And so if you need some extra help, just let me know. But I'm gonna walk you through this PowerPoint and a tutorial for it. So let me share my screen with this PowerPoint here. I'm gonna start from the beginning. Let's see, slideshow from beginning. Okay. So I call this active participation because I like for students to actively participate in their essay, as in like talk to their sources, make their sources talk to one another, and talk to their sources, make their sources talk to one another. And I call that blending, to where you blend yourself with your source or you blend two different sources. So let's go through this. I get this from the book, They Say, I Say. You don't have to own the book to get the idea. I just like to give credit where credit is due. So I do get this from the book They Say, I Say. Uh, so this exercise, this is right here is why I do this exercise. I like for students to express their ideas in response to others. I like for them to practice summarizing others or quoting others to set up your own argument. And so that way I can invite students into the conversations and the debates around them. So that's why I like to do this, is because there's these conversations going on around us. And I like to invite students into that conversation. Um, so what we do is we go into these different groups, like we have these different groups represent the sources that we're going to bring into our essay, right? So we only have three sources that we're bringing into our essay, but I have five groups here. One of the sources that we're bringing in is a commercial. Another one is that academic source, that identity source about us. And then we have our song, right? I just have a couple extra for the sake of this. And so whenever you do this discussion board, you can just put in an example blend from this table, or you can bring in a blend for your own essay. But I would like to see one blend in your essay, one blend in your essay. So think about it. We're going to look at this. So think about all my sources are gathered around the table. So here is my commercial. That's the commercial I'm using in my essay. She represents that commercial. This person represents the song that I'm bringing into my essay. So if I'm bringing in Taylor Swift, you can poke Taylor Swift in there instead of working in country. You can poke in really whatever song you are using, they go there. So here's where your commercial goes. Here's your song, and then so a couple of these, this one, this one, and this one, they all represent that identity source. So you're more than welcome to look over those sources on the discussion board. But again, I really just would rather you poke in your sources. So think of academic discourse. And by academic discourse, I mean the sources you bring into your essay, and that you are talking with these sources. So you are talking with the commercial. You are talking with that song. You are talking with that identity source. What you have to say in your essay belongs with these sources. So think of it as academic discourse, not just as writing an essay. All right. So let's say, I mean, you can even poke yourself into this table. I actually have a PowerPoint where I do. I just need to get it from my laptop. But anyway, so let's say that we're sitting around the table and we're discussing the topic of your essay, right? And in your essay, you have this quote. You have, I don't know what it's like to be you. You don't know what it's like to be me. What if we're all the same in different kind of ways? Can you relate? That's a quote that I've used in my essay, right? And so that's what they brought to the table. That's what they brought to the essay. The essay is the table. The essay is what we're talking about. We're gathered around your essay, and all of our sources are talking. And this is what one person says. And the second person speaks up later on in the essay, and they say, we can be anything we want to be, but we can't be anyone we want to be. That's what Paul Hudson, that's an identity source. That's a quote from the identity source that I'm bringing into my essay. Right. And so they are talking with the song. They are talking to the quote from the song. It's not just a random quote in the essay. They have to relate. Our quotes want to relate and talk to one another, not just be random quotes that we have. right? So a third person speaks up and he says, number one in your life's blueprint should be a deep belief in your own dignity, your own worth, your own somebodyness. So again, I'm using these quotes around the table here. I'm going to make them blend here in just a moment. Right. So that way they're not just random quotes. They're blended together. They're a discourse. They're talking to one another. So another person speaks up and they say, it's the task of the enlightened not only to ascend learning and to see the good, but to be willing to descend again. Right. That person speaks up and says this. And of course, the last person to speak is the commercial. And the commercial says, capture life no matter how you experience it. So I have all these different quotes in my essay. Right. There's 5 quotes throughout my entire essay here. There might only be 3 for you. That's perfectly fine. But there's 5 quotes throughout my entire essay. So I'm going to ask myself, how can I use these quotes? How can I use these quotes better in my essay? How can I make them talk to one another? How can I talk to my quotes? And that's where these blends come in, right? So here we have different blends. So we have, while the Pixel commercial reminds us, capture life no matter how you experience it, Greek philosopher Plato warns us with, the truth will be literally nothing but the shadows of the images. So I have 2 different quotes blended here. Here's one quote, while the Pixel commercial reminds us, the truth would literally, and there's another quote, the truth would literally be, would be literally nothing but the shadows of the images. So I have 2 different sources and they're talking to one another, right? So here is our exercise. So there's one that's done for you. There's other ones done for you on the discussion board. Here's an exercise for you. While one person asks, have you ever been left when you should have been loved? Martin Luther King returns with, what is Martin Luther King going to return with? He says, have you ever been left when you should have been loved? Martin Luther King says, you need to have a deep belief in your own dignity and your own somebodyness, right? So that way, when you're left when you should have been loved, you have your own sense of self-worth whenever you've been left. Right. So there's a quote. So some practices I would like for you for this discussion board, help each other out, find some ideas that agree and disagree among the groups and create a sentence that supports or refutes a claim. So let's go to the discussion board. So here's those ideas, right? This is the idea of us all sitting around the table and we're all talking to one another, right? Have you ever had someone interrupt you? Think about that. Think about, like, I'm saying something and somebody returns with it, right? I said a topic. I said, a point that I make in my essay, and Martin Luther King interrupts me with something he has to say, or Paul Hudson interrupts me with something he has to say, or my song interrupts me with something they had to say about this, right? So think about that. That is the idea that we're grasping here. So let's go to the discussion board. I'm going to pause this, make sure ours opens. Let's go to the discussion board and look at some of these examples. All right, I'm going to go to the discussion. This is in 08, 01, and 08 are the same. Right, so here's my blending discussion. So here we have, again, there's those conversations around the table. And here we have some specific, these are all the different sources. You don't really have to worry about these. These are here in case you want to use them in your essay. You don't have to watch these. You don't have to worry about them. Here's the scripts if you want to use them and you want to use them in your essay, but I want you to plug in your own sources, right? So here's some blending examples. There's what I have there. And there's some from other classes. So this is if you want to see some things that some other classes have said, they did a great job with this. So while Paul Hudson says you can't be anyone you want to be, he furthers King's point that you should have a deep self-belief in your own somebodyness. Right? And we want to make sure that we have cited these correctly, that they're one sentence and not 2 sentences. And that the grammar is correct. So while Plato tells us to be willing to descend again, for king and country asks, what if we're all the same in different kinds of ways, right? So we have all these different sources where they're talking to one another. The Google Pixel commercial focuses on showcasing the advances features of the phone, such as its camera quality, when the commercial says, capture, I gotta have this, I'm gonna edit that. Gotta fix his error. But again, we can see, sorry, has a space there that doesn't need to be there. Capture every moment with stunning clarity. But Plato asks, what is real? How do we know that what is seen is the true form of the world, right? And here is So check out what other students have said and do a practice blend and help each other out with these. Here's some example blends from other classes. So this is where you want to, your example blend. Here is where you want to, here is where you practice blending two sources from the 5 I posted on the discussion board. So here's my example. Right? And so students must provide the correct in-text citation while forming one sentence using two sources. Students do not have to comment on other students' blends unless you see one that is incorrect. I'm grading essays, so please help one another. So let me take out that last part there. I am not grading essays anyway. It doesn't matter. I'll just leave that. I'm now looking at the drafts that you're uploading. And so, yeah, guys, work on that and help each other do a blend. But that's how you do it. Just look at this around the table, right? Just look at these and how to blend these 5. Blend something from these 5 boxes that are open, right? Make it easier on yourself. Just take these dialogues and make 2 of them talk to one another, or you talk to them. If you want to put one like, while I believe this, Google Pixel responds with that, right? So if you want to put something that you believe and then have one of these people respond to you, that is fine also. But then again, take 2 of these dialogue boxes and make them talk to one another in one sentence. And I'm going to be checking these out. I want to make sure that you get them correct in the discussion board so that way you practice on the discussion board so that way it's correct in your essay. So practice on the discussion board so that way it gets correct in your essay. So that way if I correct it on the discussion board, you can carry that over to your essay. Make sure you get that correct in your essay. I do want at least one blend. Let me stop share here. I'm going to pause this and bring up why. All right, so I want to talk about this. I have so many tabs open. Anyway, here we go. So again, if you look at the prompt, it's been on the prompt all along, the advertisement argument prompt, it does go into this essay has a built-in MLA assignment where we practice different moves and tasks concerning our sources, right? And so here are keep scrolling. So one quote ends mid-sentence is worth 10 points. Circle back to the same quoter, that's 10 points, right? A regular quote, again, you can show us that on there. If you don't have that, that's really not that big of a deal. We'll go into that. That's more for my, anyway, I'll make a discussion board for that. So picture, image, video, specific examples. So that is where you are summarizing something that happened in the music video, for example. So if you do a good job summarizing something that happened instead of having a direct quote, you get that. But at least one blend example, that's worth 20 points. So at least one blend example is worth 20 points. So you want to make sure that you have that, all right? Signal verbs. So signal verbs mean instead of saying the Google Pixel commercial shows, the Google Pixel commercial shows, it shows. We want to have good signal verbs like it details, it relates, it explores. So we want to have better signal verbs there, right? And that we want to make sure that our works cited page is done correctly. Now we're going to be focusing on MLA all next week. So next week is MLA week. So we want to make sure that we're practicing it this week to make sure that we have it in our essay next week. All right, so let me know if you need some help. Just have some fun making 2 sources blend. Put it on the discussion board and I will comment on it on the discussion board. So if you email me saying, I don't know how to do the blends, I'm going to tell you to give it your best shot on the discussion board and I will comment it on the discussion board. You get full points for trying the discussion board. You don't get points taken off until it's not done correctly in the essay. So if you again say, I don't know how to do the discussion, I don't know how to do the blend in an email, I'm going to tell you to try your best on the discussion board and I will comment on it there. I mean, I'm kind of mean. I do the same thing with my own children in home. If a student says, I don't know how to do this, I tell them to try first, and then I will help them with what they've tried. All right, so try first.